you know if you beat your competitor, but AI doesn't know this. It can only assume this based on its collection of 10 or 20 articles on the web. The average word count for the query fanouts from October to today has doubled in length. Now, this is a huge systematic change.
When did you realize that AI search is going to be fundamentally different from traditional search?
I think fundamentally for me, the shift happened mentally when I understood the ranking algorithms, or let's say didn't understand and knew that it would be a very, very complicated thing to understand. For me, it's the reintroduction of quality signals. To give a concrete example of what I think could happen, I think that AI mode is increasingly being pushed towards the surface. We've heard in so many news feeds, agentic commerce is coming, but people have been saying this for a year already, and it didn't really take off because it wasn't quite there.
Welcome back to the Agency Insider Show. I'm your host, Navneet Kaushal, and today we are diving deep into what I believe is the most significant shift in search since the smartphones. Here's the reality. 700 million people now use ChatGPT weekly. Perplexity processes 30 million queries daily. Google AI mode has rolled into 180 plus countries, and yet most brands have no idea whether they are visible or invisible in these AI conversations. Today, I'm sitting down with someone who's been studying this transformation from the very beginning. Tom Wells is a data-obsessed strategist who is fascinated by telling stories with data. He's worked with leading tech brands, co-authored major research studies, and has been pursuing a master's in data analytics at Georgia Tech to deepen his understanding of machine learning and AI. Tom, welcome to the Agency Insider Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Navneet. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, so before we dive deep, I would love our listeners to understand what drew you to this space. Your LinkedIn says you are fascinated by telling stories with data. How did that fascination lead you from traditional SEO research into the world of AI visibility?
Yeah, so just to give a really brief intro to me, I previously was heading up AI research in SEMrush. We became very, very interested as soon as Perplexity launched web search in December 2022. Immediately, we knew that potentially this could be something very, very different. And yeah, I became effectively obsessed with AI search, decoding algorithms, and working in this space. And very, very recently, I joined Peec AI, who I believe is really pretty much the top company in the space right now, certainly in terms of team and in talent. It's pretty unbeatable. Obviously, I'm a little biased working there myself, but I'm definitely surrounded by incredible colleagues who really, they actually inspire me every day to research even more than I already was doing. So for me, the transition from CO to GEO, so we can also call it AI search. A lot of people don't like the acronym GEO. We use it internally, but effectively, I'm an AI researcher. But the transition from CO to GEO happened quite naturally, because Google actually started introducing AI elements, or elements that appear on the SERP with the goal of answering the user's question, and that the user then wouldn't need to click further to get a response. So one example would be featured snippets. Way back when CEOs were obsessed with optimizing for featured snippets or rank 0. And yeah, so the transition happened gradually, and then of course with the launch of Perplexity and web search, it started quite small. It was initially unclear, is our LLMs just going to be a wrapper for Google search? So does Perplexity just take your query and search Google? And of course, since the beginning, it's become much more complicated than that. So this is why it's a whole field of research in its own right. Bless you, Navneet.
Okay. So let's get deep into your journey. So I want our listeners to understand how you developed your expertise in the emerging field. So when did you realize that AI search is going to be fundamentally different from traditional search? Was it when the Perplexity launched and you discovered that, or was it there a specific data set or a research finding or a conversation which made you believe that this changes everything?
I think fundamentally for me, the shift happened mentally when I understood the ranking algorithms, or let's say didn't understand and knew that it would be a very, very complicated thing to understand. So Before, we had a clear target, which was to rank at the top of Google. Then it became more complicated, getting sandwiched in between paid ads, shopping ads, knowledge graph features that Google potentially summarizes and takes from other sources, often without citation. But we
Okay.
still knew that if our content is ranking top 3, at least in an SEO perspective, it's been optimized. And we could see, okay, we are number 1 for the keyword that we're looking for, or maybe for many keywords in a topic cluster. With something like Perplexity, just as a user in the early days of AI web search, I would give it queries and see that you really truly understand the probabilistic nature of LLMs when, like you said at the pre-show, that you can potentially give a query and it gives different answers. I also thought that the re-ranking stage, so if it does perform a web search, the AI still has to think in quotes of how to order the content that it retrieves. And this fundamental
Right.
shift, when I understood this and I knew that, AI has so many useful use cases, from summarizing text to helping you write an email or taking care of little tasks that you previously didn't like. And it's in this quite slow incremental way that it creeps into your daily life, to now summarizing your Gmail or asking Claude or Gemini about your calendar or your upcoming meets, or how much did that plane ticket cost, because the accounting person is asking for a receipt that you can't find. And slowly, it integrates your way into life. But that ranking process that started 3 or 4 years ago is still true in most of these processes as well. So it's a fundamental shift in the ordering of information, if you like, and that's why I found it so fascinating. Regarding how I built up my expertise, the best advice I can give any listener is absolutely to try and do everything yourself and write down all the
Okay.
questions you don't understand, and take a pause on getting AI to answer your questions until you've come up with a proposed solution or your hypothesis that then you can disprove. So it's very easy now to go, fix my code or fix my SQL query, but
Right.
if you don't have anything to test against, if you don't have a benchmark to measure against, you actually don't know if your original assumption was correct or not, because you've AI'd or AI engineered your way to maybe the correct answer. So any advice for people learning these type of things is to always have a hypothesis. Even if you're wrong 10 times, 10 reasons more why you were wrong, and you slowly progress to the right direction.
Okay. Now, you describe yourself as someone who tells stories with data. Now, in the AI visibility space, there's a lot of speculation and not a lot of rigorous search. So, how do you distinguish between what's actually measurable versus what's just industry hype?
So at PKI, where I'm geo researcher now or AI researcher now, I specifically joined this company with the proviso, or with the condition, that I would be allowed to do the most rigorous research in the industry, and that we would cut no corners and spare no expense and only use scientific methodology before we publish our findings, be it on LinkedIn, be it in a PDF study. It means that I have eyes on what we publish, and I ensure that the data methodology was rigorous. Rigorous means, for me, for example, using correct statistical methods. Just as a very simple example for the listeners, if you're testing different things in a data set, let's say you're comparing to industries and you have a set of a few hundred or a few thousand prompts per industry, good practice says that you should at least try to get a similar batch of prompts in each industry before you start comparing them. One of the biggest problems with large scale data dump SEO studies is that they will give you a headline statistic, but they will not show how they built up that data set that they queried. So in a recent example for a co-op with a client partner that we were working with, we had to build some data sets from scratch, but we still use the same statistical methods, harmonizing the data, making sure that we have a clear separation between non-branded or branded terms, so our research is as clean as possible. And this is just the beginning. The underlying part that is even more complicated is that we typically use data that enters the platform. So, we have a wealth of data, client data, anonymized, of course. We never use client prompts to do studies, but we will, for example, find the average word length of query fanouts by querying up to 20 million in our data set to give a more accurate answer to this question, instead of, I tried an experiment with 100 prompts and a Chrome extension at home, and it seems like this might be true. Like, this is a good starting point, but we
Okay.
have a real wealth of data, real data that clients are tracking every day. So it's a realistic use case for agencies, for brand managers, and so on, because this is a huge part of our business. We are pretty much becoming agency first, actually. And the other part is we need to make sure that the data from the LLMs that we are tracking is clean when it enters the system, not that we are having any problems with things like duplication, incorrect classification. And so for these type of things, we have an incredible machine learning team who builds from scratch their own named entity recognition models. When they decide in the team, the existing ones in the market are simply not good enough. So we will make it, check the accuracy metrics, and basically improve on this. So this is sort of the level of detail that we take, that every person is priding themselves on their specific role. And the end of this is, I'm the lucky person who gets to actually hit query on the data and come up with these great findings, for example.
Okay, so now, of course, AI visibility is such a new field. There aren't established playbooks. So I know you said the best way is to track lots of prompts. So, but are there other sources or experiments or approaches which you have found has been more valuable?
So I will say that we always think of it in a client-first way. So if you're asking me, what can be beneficial, I would look at the use case, the niche, even the country, the region, or the model that someone's interested in, because all of the variables that I mentioned, there might be a different way that we would look at it. So just to give you a simple example, one thing that I've been recommending clients to do and to try to get started with this world of prompt tracking is you can actually use it as a way of brand reputation and identifying incorrect information about your brand. So let's imagine that you are a software provider who has certain technical features. Now, it's important for your users to all know that you have this feature, and for them, you would count that as a positive user interaction that they found out. Let's take a really simple example. PKI has single sign-on, single sign-on for enterprise, or something quite basic. Okay, I would set this up as a prompt. Does PKI, turn it into a question, does PKI have single sign-on? And I will monitor all of the sources that answer that negatively or incorrectly. And I will reach out to them and correct this information. Hopefully they react quickly. Usually they do. The journalists I've been working with are incredibly fast and incredibly good. And once they realize that the information is incorrect, because often they don't realize, you'll see in 2 to 4 weeks that the questions in sum total are being answered more correctly than before, which means your picture of brand reputation is becoming more correct instead of less correct over time. And this is one like really interesting use case that I think not many people have sort of understood yet.
So I mean, this is very interesting, because what I see is how any AI visibility tool works is they go into your they just go into your top of the, not exactly top, they go into MOFU, not middle of the funnel, then they say, okay, what is, so they are not tracking their brands and how their brand is being perceived by AI. I think it's very important it is very important to know, even if you are ranking, but your features, maybe you are ranking, but it says, okay, this feature is, they are not telling specific features about you. You might get a listicle from ChatGPT, but it clearly doesn't show that feature, and your competitor might get a business.
Exactly.
So I think it's a very good thing to get these things right.
It's
right.
super
So
powerful.
any other ways you think? Any other ways you think should the brands should be tracking anything else besides what you've given? Or is there another example you can give?
So, okay, so we know, for example, that most influence in terms of brand mention. So that's simply getting your brand mentioned at all. We'll leave the sentiment discussion to the side for now, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, right? We will just say your goal as a manager, as an AI search manager in your in-house or agency, is to increase the number of brand mentions overall in AI search for your target brand. Okay, we know that one of the most powerful ways to do this is looking at all of the content that doesn't mention you. We call this, in PKI, we call this gap analysis. We have features that can easily do this automatically with a simple filter. So imagine that you say, okay, I have a niche that I'm really interested in. I'm monitoring my very targeted, well-crafted, well-tagged set of prompts. But the problem is I can see that with a few filters, 4 of my competitors are always being mentioned in these sources, but I am not, even though I consider my company to have the same features, the same level, whether it's revenue, number of employees, LinkedIn followers. I feel like I should be mentioned too. So you can get your brand and PR team to actually construct an outreach campaign specifically targeting all the places you think you should be mentioned, because the reason is you've already seen that 4 of your competitors are. So for the journalist or for the person publishing, it expands their list and makes it more accurate and therefore more valuable to AI search and Google, right? And for you, you get the benefit that you get another mention from another source, and you know the source is already working because it worked for your competitors. And this is the value of prompt tracking, because they're your only targeting sources you know are already being used in citations, right? So it's much quicker than let's make a list of 1,000 blogs that I should do outreach to, because this will take you a long time. If I know the 5 to 10 to 20 that are already mentioning my competitors but not me, this is one way. I use the same strategy also for YouTube videos as well. YouTube is becoming, it's always been a factor in AI search, but it's very powerful because AI simply take the transcript and read through it. And you can even think of a YouTube transcript in the same way that you think of a blog article or a listicle. It works more or less the same for AI search. And we can also detect, okay, this YouTuber mentioned 5 top AI coding tools, but it didn't mention mine, and I'm really upset about that. So for her next video, let's reach out and make sure that we give her the full PR package, invite her to the office, meet the founders, do this really top outreach, and I'm sure then she would consider to mention me in the next video. And because she's already a well-liked source by AI, then we have what I call a very targeted, well-crafted gap analysis outreach campaign. So you can see how we can slowly move the Lego bricks together to actually come up with quite a powerful strategy pretty quickly.
Right. So when you talk about gap analysis outreach, so because not every brand has large budgets, and especially for a small business, does it make sense if they cannot reach that, so they create a similar kind of resource, or they create a similar kind of citation? Does that help?
Absolutely. So of course, I mean, basically, if you have the possibility to find these journalists, either you have a thought leader in your company who's particularly active on social media, and they reach out personally and say, hey, you have a great listicle, but we are missing, and I don't know if you're aware, but we are actually one of the top companies. Usually, in my experience, people are very willing to add you. This is not, I'm not talking even about a paid placement. I'm talking about organic outreach where I'm asking simply to be mentioned, right? If for some reason you have a limitation, perhaps your company's growing in the sector, it's not quite yet established, where maybe your audience haven't thought to add you to their listicles, or maybe you're still kind of MVP, or you're still developing, you're still startup, and you don't have much that you can work with. You can, of course, still try this approach and give your own validations of why, which, for example, if you have a particularly interesting product or use case, give the person who wrote the article free access for a week and say, if you don't like it, let's do a call and let's talk about it together. And at least then you become more present in the mind of the people who are influencing AI search. So this is one way. But regarding citations specifically, there are even companies that are pursuing what I would call a citation-first strategy. Now, this is typically agencies or brand managers, because they understand the same thing that I understand, that to get these citations is ultimately how you prove value to the brands that are being cited, right? So let's imagine you're an online magazine who's featuring tech reviews, PC Mag or Tech Radar, to name a few simple examples. Okay, my goal as the brand manager is I can't increase brand mentions of Tech Radar because it's an online resource. I'm not Nike running shoes or Puma or something. Okay, so now I have to look at citations and how I can prove that I'm increasing them over time, because ultimately, when the agency managers and brand managers would report back or work on their affiliate marketing, through which they earn a large portion of their revenue these days, they want to tell the technological or computer manufacturers, hey, we are being cited very regularly in ChatGPT as a resource. Do you want us to do a review of you, whether it's paid or organic? And they expand their kind of reach in this way. So there is a lot of interest in this citation-first strategy. So just to give you a couple of examples of how that can help, even if you're the own brand, there are also examples of brands being both the source of truth and the mention at the end. So, for example, it works best with quite narrow niches where there's a lot of expertise required to actually write the listicle. So I'll give you a real example would be cybersecurity tools. it's actually quite hard for a copywriter to come in and write a definitive listicle that would resonate with another cybersecurity researcher, because the first person in the company who evaluates a tool to buy is the same person with that role before it gets passed up the chain to the CFO. I need a cybersecurity researcher to even explain these concepts to me. So the cybersecurity researcher needs to resonate with the source that they're reading. So typically a good listicle would need real expertise. In this type of niche, if you have a brand who's performing well, you can absolutely get your own content ranked and become also a source of authority. And that's amazing, because then you begin to control the narrative of what's said, particularly about your brand.
So, but recently, in recent news, how Google Update has been hitting these self-contained listicles. We had this Shopify where Lily Ray mentions, and so does it not can hurt your ranking, or I think you need to do it in a very limited way, not overblow it. What is your take on that?
So yeah, firstly, of course, always shout out to Lily Ray. She's great, absolute huge supporter of Lily Ray, and I know she's been on the show as well. And yeah, typically when Lily says something, it does make sense, and it's worth checking out her research as well. I always do. So yes, of course, Google updates have been hitting us since almost Google existed, where in the webmaster blogs they can easily say one thing, and the reality must first be proved with data. Now, one kind of trending topic on LinkedIn that everybody's been talking about in the last 2 weeks is something called Mount AI. Now, if you imagine the shape of a mountain, this is how people are now making the joke about this will be your traffic if you do too much AI content. You'll first have a big up, and then you will be coming down the other side. So people are calling this Mount AI, like on LinkedIn. I can't claim credit for that. And there's some really interesting examples. So in general, even if it wasn't the listicle that Lily's referring to, if the content quality is not matching with the level of output that you're doing, so if I just dump 100 AI generated articles and expect Google to index it and make sense of all of these things, but in the last 3 months I only published 3 blog articles, it's not really going to go very well, because firstly, Google's crawlers and AI crawlers will sort of understand that, hold on a second, this almost dormant website published 3 or 4 company blog posts or a newsletter. Now all of a sudden they have 100 blogs. In terms of crawling and crawl budget, the first stage to get cited in AI, in any LLM, is to rank on Google. So if you're doing anything that's damaging Google rankings, it's probably not the best idea. Firstly, for classic SEO, classic traffic, and secondly, for the AI re-ranking stage. So a huge AI-generated output is probably not going to help your effort, specifically to listicles. It's always been Google's advice that, blatantly self-promotional material that doesn't reflect reality would be punished in some way. So I think it's not really something new. I just think the implication is new for the industry that, hey, we got away with listicles for some time. Now they're going to crack down on it. So I would put it in the bucket of, let's monitor it and see what happens. But at the same time, if you are working in a competitive niche, all of your competitors are having comparisons with you, and it's, buyer guide, shopping guide, brand X doesn't have this feature, brand Y has this feature, and so on. So I still believe you need an accurate representation and accurate tool comparisons on your website to kind of put your flag in the sand and say, guys, we've researched this to the best of our ability. All the information is truthful and verified. This is a really good source that also human users can eventually find and say, okay, they've done a really big, impressive buyer guide here. So yeah, long answer, but it is also a complicated topic. So.
No, it is. Yeah, but right. So you need to get the context right. Now, so can you walk us through what your typical week looks like now when it comes to AI visibility research, and what are you actually measuring, and how often are you surprised by what data shows?
Yeah, so a typical day, no two days are the same, I would say. So it's sorry, just quickly get rid of this pop-up. It's very varied. The core goal of what I do is to understand how LLMs work, particularly the ranking and retrieval functions, as best as possible. So okay, so this is a core part of my research, but of course, interesting ideas or other studies in the industry can also inspire things as well. One of my obsessions for the last 3 months is being how ChatGPT shopping works. How does it produce the product carousel?
Okay.
In October or November, I was one of the first people, along with a couple of other top researchers as well, to basically see that, hold on a second, the ChatGPT product carousel just looks like recycled Google products. If it looks like it's querying, if the price is the same, the merchant name is the same, sometimes even the image is the same. But the question then becomes, what does that mean for clients? How can we research that robustly, and how can we improve that? So one of the things that we're looking at very closely is e-com, how ChatGPT shopping works, and we will have an upcoming study on that in a few weeks' time. So that's going to be really, really interesting for people to read.
Okay. And so is there a recent finding that caught you off guard?
So I wouldn't say it was a surprise. It was just sort of surprising how uniform. So I posted recently, I think in the last few days, and it was that the average word count for the query fanouts from October to today has doubled in length, from about 6 words on average to about 12. Now, this is a huge systematic change, and I'm referring to ChatGPT when I talk about query fanouts in this particular case. And the change that surprised me was not this doubling, because we understand as AI researchers, when you have a longer query fanout, what this really means is that things like vector search can work better. More context in usually leads to a more precise retrieval, and this is kind of what we believe that the OpenAI engineers are doing. But the perhaps more surprising thing was this trend line of doubling and the word count changing was the same for every country and language combination that we looked at. It's not like, let's say Hindi language or Spanish had a different trend line. It was all the same. There was a uniform doubling across all language pairs. And the underlying reason for this is because it's a transformer model. It's not really engineered in a language-specific way. When you put some input in this model and get some output, it's more or less the same, even if it's translating steps or doing things with language tokens. So that was a really, really, really interesting finding that we had recently.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Google Gemini. Now, Google Gemini now powers AI Overview, AI Mood, Gemini Assistant, in fact, in Gmail as well. From a visibility standpoint, does optimizing for Gemini creates compound benefits across all these surfaces, or are they different enough to require separate strategies?
Really good question. So what I would actually start with usually is Google AI mode. Now, the reason for that is it's not always clear, and I do have to explain this a lot when we're speaking with clients or other researchers, is that AI overviews simply don't always trigger and can still result in organic search. So if you imagine giving a keyword into Google, sometimes the AI overview will appear, sometimes not. But with AI mode, you can track something every time, because by definition, the way AI mode works is you give it a query and it works similar to ChatGPT. So for me personally, I find it's somewhat simpler to do a prompt tracking project starting with Google AI mode. And then I might pull in AI overview data and compare it and see, are the sources the same? Often they are somewhat different. But yeah, I would say that having a Google-specific strategy is usually enough. I wouldn't say you would have a person working on Gemini, a person working on AI mode, a person working on AI overview. I think that would be a little bit overkill. But in terms of model-specific strategies, yeah, we see big differences between ChatGPT, Google-based models, and Perplexity, for example.
Okay. And so it's February 2026. If we are sitting here having this conversation in February 2027, what do you predict will be the most significant changes in AI search, and what should agencies be preparing for now?
That's a great question.
No, it's very tough to guess, but I know we cannot. Yeah.
Probably will be replaying this clip in 2027 and putting me on the spot and seeing, how close was I. My opinion is that the biggest change is going to be called what I would call the reintroduction of quality signals. Now, this takes some unpacking to get to what we mean. When Google, developed PageRank, they just ranked pages that had the most backlinks or links pointing to them. It was a very simple but powerful algorithm. And over time, they realized that you can game the system by buying more backlinks, and then your page will be at the top. Okay, so they had to
Yes.
introduce something like quality signals. If a user clicks on this spam article and then immediately leaves, that's a negative user signal. If enough do that in the same period of time, well, let's push it down the
Right.
rankings. And things like uh, nav boost and certain other things that they have in the internals of their algorithm. And what we saw is it got incredibly complex over time. If you've ever seen one of the brilliant breakdowns of the Google algorithm and some of the posts on LinkedIn, you'll see it's the interaction of many complex systems. And I believe we'll begin to see the same thing happen in AI models because simply it will need to happen. So of course, a lot of people are generating AI content, which for me is a little bit like regression to the mean. It means that, if you have similar inputs and produce similar articles, you get a certain similarity between a lot of the
Right.
content that's produced, right? This is also the reason, as I mentioned, that query fanouts are getting longer because ChatGPT realized we need more context to differentiate between these things, hence the doubling since October. So for me, it's the reintroduction of quality signals. To give a concrete example of what I think could happen, I think that AI mode is increasingly being pushed towards the surface. You can start an AI mode chat now from the AI overviews and so on, and you see Google interlinking this, doing countless experiments and so on, and trying to get the Google search surface as optimized as possible, but all still usually linking back to some kind of AI workflow. And so I thought, well, if they have the world's most powerful search index, if they have the world's most powerful shopping graph and knowledge graph, wouldn't it make a lot more sense if they better interlinked it in between, AI mode? Now, we could argue that maybe they're doing that already, but typically if you look at Gemini, it's doing a simple Google grounding search and then doing the same thing as Perplexity or ChatGPT by re-ranking this information. But I believe that, for example, we could see the return of for example, author authority become important so that AIs would be able to discern the difference between a qualified author to talk about that subject or someone who's particularly well known, and that their content could actually see a bit of a boost as well. So this is one big change. I would call it like the return of quality signals and a way to filter the content. The other ones that I will put in a brackets where I say, I believe it will happen, but the implementation or the execution might be different is recently, I also wrote a recent blog post about the introduction of the Universal Commerce Protocol. So Google's answer to the Agent Commerce Protocol from ChatGPT and co, where they co-developed this agentic shopping protocol with basically with Shopify. Now, I do believe this is interesting because, we've heard in so many news feeds, agentic commerce is coming, but people have been saying this for a year already, and it didn't really take off because it wasn't quite there. So if you go to ChatGPT, I've got plenty of examples on this on LinkedIn or in my blog where you basically say, find me a suitcase for less than $300. And then you get the shopping carousel, you click on the suitcase, it says in stock, but you go to the product page and you get there and it's out of stock or a different color. Because ChatGPT is effectively scraping Google Shopping, it's not querying the live data like many users kind of get this magician feeling that maybe it is. This is exactly the problem that Universal Commerce Protocol should begin to solve, not just in terms of querying live price data better, but also unlocking a few agentic capabilities by seeing, the Gemini agent would go to a merchant, look for a product and go, oh, this merchant has potentially good user reviews. It's got the product in stock based on live data that's similar to Shopping Graph. You can check out instantly. You can accomplish your workflow like that in a connected way, not a scraping way. So the second point would be, so I said quality signals for number one. For number two, I would say agentic, but in the sense of, we are moving from a hacky scraping execution that ChatGPT does with Google Shopping and Google Maps, where it just recycles results in a non-live way, to a more live MCP or even UCP style way. This can be number two. And number three, of course, is the introduction of advertising into AI search. And I just leave this as an unknown. Typically, you see kind of two trends that are opposing each other. One is the open source community continually developing impressive results with open source projects that kind of link a bit away from more of the commercial side of things. And you see the
Right.
other line, which is the desperation of OpenAI investors to finally get some cash back. Now,
Right.
this is two opposing forces, and how they will meet or benefit each other, or basically keep that dissonance. Not exactly sure, but the fact is that ads will come to AI search. The question remains, like, what will the implementation look like? What will the effect on user statistics be? Will we see a drop off in free users from ChatGPT? Will there be an easy way to measure these ads? Will we even be able to prove their performance if it's a probabilistic model? So I just put it as a big question mark next to number 3. But those are the 3 things that if we're sitting in 2027, I could see that we would be talking about.
Right. Now, let's get a little tactical. So research shows that there is only about 25% overlap in what ChatGPT and Perplexity recommends for the same queries. So that means if you are optimizing for just one platform, you might be invisible on the other 3/4 of the time. So let's break down what makes each platform different. Now, let's start with the citation pattern, which is, of course, everybody wants to be cited. Now, research shows ChatGPT cites Wikipedia about 12% of the time, Claude cites 0.1% of the time, that is 121 times less. Perplexity doesn't even cite Wikipedia at all, but leans heavily on Reddit. So, what do these differences tell us about each platform's trust philosophy?
Okay. It's really, really good question, Navneet. And I want to give actually the users like an actionable takeaway that they can all do after this. They hopefully view this podcast. So the takeaway is every study out there that says citation is not measuring it in the way that I would say we measure a citation at Peec AI, for example. What they're actually saying is my source was retrieved. Okay, I'll give you a really simple example. Often ChatGPT might pull 5 Reddit threads, but it might only use for the answer 1 of them or 2 of them, right? So this differential, we internally in the platform, and me as a researcher anyway, we track this differential and see if it was retrieved, step 1, was it actually used in the answer? Because if it was actually used in the answer and we can actually see that at scale, that is a much more powerful finding, because there are so many cases of what I would call shadow links or hidden links where content is retrieved regularly. We see this in the ChatGPT source code. It can one of the reasons Wikipedia is so high in all of these statistics is that if people are not correctly filtering the source data that they're analyzing, if you go into Chrome DevTools today and run a ChatGPT chat and just see what happens, you'll see it often retrieves 15 or even 20 Wikipedia articles, but it will actually actively use 1. So what I'm interested in as a researcher is what it's actively using. Not retrieving is important too. It gives us a flavor or an indication, but the most powerful finding and client strategy comes from this second step. So I would say that I would hope that users would go with a platform that actually allows them to easily track this and very, very quickly see, okay, Reddit's average citation rate is going to be much lower than other high quality sources because, as I said, it might be retrieved 5 times and cited once. In this case, we'd say the citation rate was just 20. So to get platform specific and basically what this means, the real best way to actually do this is to create a prompt set of your niche, and it can be a few hundred or a few thousand prompts to get started, track it by a few different models, and then use exactly the technique that I said. Even on a domain level, we can say, okay, is YouTube a top source? Is Reddit a top source? Now, it may be used many, many times. Used means retrieved by the model, but was it actually actively used in the text? And if it was used in the text, what was it used for? Was it used for a user opinion or was it used for your brand sentiment? So when you're reviewing your AI answers, what you really want to check is, okay, sanity check here, what matters to me? What matters to me is the sentiment that's next to my brand name. If there's a neutral or negative sentiment, this is a source that I actively would love to influence or correct. If I'm positively mentioned, you want to basically double down and get more mentions in the same source as well. So it's a more nuanced way. It's not necessarily as easy as getting a top list of what is retrieved by the model. It's much more powerful to look at what's actually cited. You can use tracking tools to do this. You can get a consultant using tracking tools to do this for you if you don't want to do it yourself. And this is the key to really unlocking. And regarding differences between models, yes, we do see differences. So So if we look at, for example, the type of content, we can classify into listicle, article, product page, homepage, and so on and so on. We do see model-specific differences. You mentioned Perplexity, where it is known that Perplexity does have a strong favor in terms of UGC, particularly Reddit, compared to some of the other models. The other thing I would say that's really, really interesting is that rate that I mentioned of how often the LLM is actually using your content. This is also different for each model. So Perplexity, with its inline citations, is not very generous, we can say. So if you're a brand agency looking for a citation-first strategy and you're optimizing for Perplexity, you might be annoyed to see your content is retrieved and retrieved and retrieved, but the citation actually using might be lower than you expect. Whereas if you do the same strategy for ChatGPT and AI mode, and you follow the same kind of good principles, you might actually have more success in terms of getting cited, for example. This is just one of the model-specific differences. I don't say neglect Perplexity, I just say be aware that there can be differences in your niche and check it out. And I think you should also spend the time where there's the most reward. So, if you have a niche and you see, for example, wow, this specific content is getting cited actually a lot, and ChatGPT can be very generous and cite the same articles multiple times in the same prompt. That's something that you can also potentially learn from. So concrete example, I stick with TechRadar and I stick with Citation First because they're a magazine. I noticed doing a study that specifically the listicles mentioning more than 3, 4, or 5 products were being retrieved and cited regularly. I noticed that still AI is retrieving their single product review pages because they have both. They have a group of 5 products and they have a single review page. And I noticed that ChatGPT was retrieving them, but not using them. And the content team is investing heavily. There's probably also affiliate reasons why they do that. But also I noticed in the content structure of the individual review page that if you look at TechRadar's listicles, they have good headings, they have user signals, like how many users have reviewed them, how many experts have looked at them. The page is really well structured. So they took the time to structure the hub page. But if you look at the single review pages, often it's just a huge block of text, no headings, no paragraphs, very hard to decipher. And it made me think that, there's 2 reasons here why AI is retrieving but not citing. It's searching for this product and it's finding TechRadar ranking on Google, but it's not choosing to cite because it doesn't meet the criteria. It's not easy, it's not well chunked, it's not got structured data, and it only gives information on one product. So this is just one piece of information that I can tell, that you always have to look at the type of article that's being retrieved. And again, in a summary statistics way, if you have your prompt tracking project set up, you can see the top type of articles or sources that are being retrieved and their citation rate. And these 2 things together, you can make a educated guess of what type of content that you could be producing.
Okay. Now, for ChatGPT gets about 80% of its citations from commercial.com domains and nearly half from the third-party sites like Yelp, TripAdvisor. Yet it also has 99% brand mention rate for commercial queries. So what does that combination tells us about how brands should think about ChatGPT visibility?
So really interesting case. So I recommend to also have some way of tracking your AI visibility in different axes. So one might be the segment that you're interested in, let's say product category, for example, not every business has the same product line, but also you could think of it as in buyer awareness journey, or you could also think of it in SEO terms in query intent. Is this informational? Is this transactional, commercial, nav local, like your previous example? And all of those different intents or stages of awareness have different parts of, represent different parts of the buyer journey, and therefore different content is ranking for these things. So if you set up a prompt tracking project in this way and you can filter, firstly, it's going to give you actionable data that you can use. So there's no silver bullet to say, if it's a commercial query, write a listicle. Yes, it's true that for commercial queries, for example, ChatGPT tends to prefer listicles. The reason I believe that this is true is that it's the TechRadar example again, where per query fanout, it's getting informational bang for your buck, if you like. So it gets more product information from a listicle because there's more diverse information about 5 to 10 products than from a single results page. So this is, and also in the commercial stage, typically buyers are also comparing options. right? If we count commercial query as best smartphones under $500, let's say, I don't say which smartphone yet I want to buy, so it has to research. So therefore, it's naturally gravitating towards comparison articles, listicles, buying guides, and so on. But I
Right.
would say there's two parts to this. So one is the external part of your brand, where, are you being mentioned in a positive sentiment, like I've said before, in all of the sources that matter? And if not, why not? And if not, what can you do about it? This is super important. The second part is, if the AI is going to retrieve information about your product, is it accurate? Is it correct? Is it in the sentiment that you would hope? This means, is it getting accurate pricing data back, for example, as a simple one? For example, if your competitor is saying they're $100 cheaper, maybe it's actually not true, and AI has either hallucinated this or got wrong information from a query fan out or pulled a different source. So that's why I say it's super, super important for not only to monitor the external sources, how they mention your brand, but everything that relates to your product criteria, aspects, reviews, that you have kind of a bird's eye view on this as well to make sure that it's actually accurate. This is best monitored, like I said, in a prompt tracking way, where you carefully review the information that's actually being retrieved in those comparisons. Like, how do you match up against your competitors? We move into a meta level of, you as a sales manager know if you beat your competitor on feature X, Y, or Z, whether it's price, quality, style, whatever it is, prestige. But AI doesn't know this. It can only assume this based on its collection of 10 or 20 articles on the web that it's retrieved from you. So you better
Right.
sort of understand, like, does my sales manager reality match the AI reality of retrieval?
Now, you mentioned quite a lot of time sentiment analysis. So correct me if I'm wrong. When I query for any business or let's say any specific need, I don't see ChatGPT or other LLM citing something as negatively, because unless I'm looking for a negative citation or a negative sentiment, it's not. So even if I'm looking, for example, going back to my keyword like best CRM, it's not going to say, okay, this is the bad CRM. So does sentimental analysis is correct way to does it matter, or is it a different way to measure it?
So just I will mention that one thing that we see from competitors in all markets is that when they do this listicle tactic of put themselves number one and their competitors 2, 3, 4, 5 down to 10, okay, often they will give accurate information, but in the most minimal or lowest way possible. What I mean is, for example, they might say, this product is only suitable for small, medium businesses, even if it's an enterprise product, or they will add certain limitations into this text that
Right.
may or may not be true, or at least would be debatable. And for sure, ChatGPT does pick up on this chunk of text and factor it into its answer, because if your top 4 or 5 competitors say you're only targeting small businesses, your pricing model is not as transparent as it could be, and so on, ChatGPT will actively pass this information. So if you look at pure sentiment, it's always relative. LLMs are quite sycophantic. They are naturally more positive than negative. However, when you're force rank ordering competitors, it will pick up on those aspects that are from the sources. Because if you push the LLM to say, what is the real difference? And it will say in a turn 2 or turn 3 or turn 4 conversation, oh, well, actually, this competitor's most known for selling to small and medium businesses. Or my first example, they don't have single sign-on, even if it's true. That's why I say it's crucial, because not just sentiment of like the overall paragraph, but on a level of, is this accurate information about your product? And compared to your competitors, what is the sentiment there? So for example, if I have the 2 sentences, let's try and use brands we're not affiliated with or brand neutral terms, but like if I say, TechRadar is the best, most comprehensive online magazine in the world, this is super positive sentiment. If I have the sentiment, TechRadar doesn't really offer reviews about certain categories of products, and it's really annoying that I can't always find what I want. This is neutral bordering on negative. So this is why I say you have to monitor it in relation to your closest competitors on a specific feature set, and then you'll get a more sort of accurate sentiment analysis, basically.
Okay. So now, given limited resources, how should a brand decide which AI platform to prioritize first? Is there a framework or a decision tree you use when advising clients on where to focus?
So of course, one of the ways is, people look at number of users. So, primarily at the moment it's ChatGPT and, we can say the Google family, if you like. It can still be relevant to optimize for other AI models as well, not just because, we can say there's a commercial intent. I mean, in general, it's good to be found everywhere that the people are looking to buy your product, particularly for B2B or high ticket items. It's absolutely worth to do it, even from a brand reputational perspective. But I would say that even if you don't necessarily see an immediate commercial benefit of optimizing for Perplexity, if you were to include other models in your prompt tracking project, for example, you wouldn't actually have to do anything other than click a tick box. And you get so much more information back and say, by the way, Perplexity likes this content, but not this one. So even if you don't necessarily see immediate commercial upside, it can actually give you actionable data that informs helping a little bit the other models as well. So in general, I do recommend that, if you had to, gun to the head, say what resources to spend on, we would focus on ChatGPT and Google AI mode for sure. But I would include as well other models in the prompt tracking to try and get a little bit more data about the brand and see in general how it's perceived by AI as well.
So is there a difference you see when it comes to these LLMs, if it's a B2B or a B2C brand, or does it matter?
Yeah, there is a difference. So this we can kind of categorize as, I would say, niche and level of competitiveness. So if you are a Swiss precision machine manufacturer, you are selling B2B because the B2C doesn't have the $500,000 budget to buy your precision tools, have the time to do a 6-month sales cycle. However, for AI search, it's interesting, right? Because if you have a niche industry, this will also be reflected in the classic SEO way of how many brands are ranking for related keywords or topic clusters. So we'll see basically that probably a few, not many top trade journals have the specific information that these buyers are looking for. And actually another usual pattern is that the client's own website would be ranking themselves. And often it's not being SEO optimized. It's not necessarily, an SEO often hasn't looked at it for 10 or 15 years. It's sort of a set and forget strategy where they basically just, leave it. But it shows this ranking potential. When I see it, I'm like, okay, the barrier to entry for this niche is simply to be the brand who produces these things, right? The next step of the journey is to optimize, are they considered the best brand by AI? Because the sales reality of these, let's say, precision machine or very, very niche B2B businesses is they are incredibly good at what they do. And we have to then prove that to Google, to AI search, and eventually B2B buyers as well, because typically in B2B, it's a quick, sanity check. Like, I was told that, this Swiss company is the top one in the world. Is this really true? And then AI is going to go off and do something and try and validate this claim. So, this is a more kind of niche use case. B2C is incredibly competitive, and we're typically going to see more diversity in the sources, in the citations. If it's a competitive niche, let's say professional services or fashion products or beauty products, typically between the models, there might be more diverse brands mentioned. And the one thing we didn't talk about as well is personas as well. So if we have, Gen Z, millennial, or boomer style prompts or older generation style prompts, that may return subconsciously or consciously to the AI, different product brands and so on. So this is also something we have to consider is, what persona is your key target audience that you're selling to, and you can tailor the language of those prompts to better reflect the selling reality of those.
Okay. Now, given that LLM only cites 2 to 7 domains per response compared to Google's traditional 10 blue links, the competition for these few citation slots is obviously intense. So what's your framework for creating content that has the best chance of being cited across multiple AI platforms?
I think the first thing to understand is the intent of the prompts or the prompt set that you're going for. So that includes, we talked about query intents, bias stage, and is the content that you produce appropriate for that? And this does go back to SEO principles and so on, where you basically, if you are looking at a commercial comparison prompt, if you are only delivering pure information without things like price, not necessarily availability until we get more agentic, but key product information that users would be looking for in a Google way, the users would bounce and simply not continue because they're like, okay, I just wanted to get the prices, or I just wanted to get the dimensions of the product or some key product information. So the biggest tip I can give is making content that's appropriate to the niche and the stage of awareness that you're doing. And this has a much higher chance of being cited by, let's say, multiple models. Of course, there are model-specific differences, but yeah, this is probably the number one thing. And what do I mean by appropriate? A good indicator would be to research what is being cited often now. And we go back to my favorite metric of the average citation rate. So not just what's retrieved, but actively used by the model. If I filter, like if I just set all models, I'll see the sources that rank for all of the models. And then I'll see, okay, what are the patterns? Is it just listicles, blog articles? Is it thought leadership? How can I understand and learn from this content to get a gauge of what we should be producing, basically?
Okay. Now, you have mentioned there's no search volume equivalent for AI queries. We all know that. How do you even know which query matters if you can't see query frequency?
So firstly, we do have ways to estimate prompt volume. I would say that when you put a specific number on it, it's usually inaccurate. So some providers do try and tell you 1,000,000, 1,751, whatever it is. Right? We put it in a range, and we actually create the range specific to the prompt set. So using things like clickstream data, we can extrapolate that and basically then say, okay, given the competitiveness of this niche, perhaps given the overall topic volume from clickstream data, we can make educated guesses of, is this a high volume, medium volume, or low volume prompt? This is something that, with providers like us, you can see, and it at least gives you an indication. But I would also say that, what really matters is what's important to the brand. So you can have a high volume prompt that's also not relevant to them. You can have a low volume prompt that's also relevant to them. We work with clients every day, and both of these things can be true at the same time. So you really need to listen to the instinct of, does this make sense, what we are optimizing for? And is this something that matters to us? If it's a low volume prompt, but that one check that your high ticket B2B buyer is performing is incredibly valuable to you, then of course you want to spend a lot of resources optimizing to make sure your brand information is correct. And again, if you're just going for volume, if you maybe have a low ticket price or product item and you just want as many citations or many brand mentions as possible, then of course that's another strategy as well. So it's very case by case basis. So, but yeah, Navneet, I would thank you. I would say, unfortunately, at this point, I do have to wrap up with you. So
yeah, just the last question I'm just gonna say. So,
okay.
but yes, we are just short of time. So. Yes. So after all this research, what does Google AI good AI visibility actually looks like? Are there any benchmarks brands should be aiming for, share of voice percentage, citation rates, or other metrics you have found meaningful?
So it's only rule of thumb, and I can't give hard and fast numbers, but I would say that we see that the average citation rate, as mentioned for Perplexity, tends to be lower simply because it's more mean in terms of giving citations. For Google AI mode, it's a little bit conservative. So Google AI mode rarely cites the same content more than once, in extreme cases twice. So you're not going to see a citation rate really creep above that. And ChatGPT can be more generous, and you can see sometimes the same piece of content 5, 6, in extreme cases 10 times in the same prompt. So it really depends on what you're optimizing for. But I would say that a really good way is to benchmark the number of mentions compared to your competitors. So we wouldn't necessarily say share of voice. We would just say perhaps share of prompts where you're mentioned in, or overall number of mentions to get some simple numbers in. And the same thing as well would be not citations retrieved, but citations actually used if you're going for the citation first approach.
Okay. And for listeners who want to dive deeper into your work, where should they find you? What's the best way to connect or follow your research?
So obviously working at Peec AI, so give the company a follow on LinkedIn. We publish a lot of great research. So Peec AI on LinkedIn. I'm Tom Wells. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm publishing research at least once every week. So if you connect with me there, send me a message and I'll be happy to answer any of your AI questions that you have.
Okay. And well, Tom, that has been an exceptional conversation, and you give very good examples, which I'm sure my listeners will take home with. And once again, thank you for bringing data-driven perspective to this space, which desperately needs it. And for our listeners, if you find this episode valuable, please share it with colleagues who's grappling with AI visibility questions, and subscribe to the Agency Insider Show so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. I'm Navneet Kaushal. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in digital marketing. Thank you.